Podcasting from Hartford, you're listening to the Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast.
Game number 3 for the UConn football team this week. We've had a lot of excitement over in our neck of the woods this week before we even got to the game against Purdue. So to help us preview Purdue, we've got Mike Carmin. He's of the Journal and Courier. Mike, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mike, before we really dive into the matchup that we've got with UConn and Purdue this week, help us get the expectations of the Purdue football program heading into this season, and what was expected of this team, heading into its first game that they played last week.
Well, from my perspective, this is a season that Purdue just needs to find a way to get 6 wins, get to a bowl game, kind of reset some things. They're coming off back-to-back losing seasons. Of course, COVID, played a role last year. And they've gone through numerous changes on the defensive side of the ball. They're on their 3rd different play caller, coordinator type of thing. That's a whole nother story, how many defensive coordinators they have. But they've gone through a lot of changes. They just kind of need to settle down, kind of get the program back to when Jeff Brom started back in 2017, where he was a very creative play caller. It's not about trick plays, just about, bringing a little bit more fun back to Ross-Ade Stadium. So they've got a very difficult schedule. And I just felt like, okay, if they can get to 6 wins this year, that kind of gets them to a bowl, gives them some extra practices, and then push forward from there. And you hope recruiting picks up, player development picks up. Mm-hmm. And then, in a year or two, get back into the conversation of trying to challenge for the Big Ten West.
In terms of those expectations you had of trying to get to 6 wins, obviously great to start off with a win in week 1 against Oregon State. Take us through your thoughts on that game and how Purdue looked in that win over Oregon State.
Well, the major thing to look at in that game is just how the defense played, because it was a new defense. Well, or in reality, it went back to a defense that they'd played when Jeff Brom first started. Was just a basic 4-3, but the whole idea was to be more aggressive in how they played and how they approached things. Now, I don't know if UConn fans realize this, but 2020, their defensive coordinator was Bob Diaco.
Right. We were all looking forward to that return this year. That was the game that everyone had starred, but I guess Purdue had some different thoughts there.
Yeah, but the defense was a mess last year, and as UConn fans can probably attest, the reasons why. I don't think we need to go through all the reasons why that happened. They were passive. It just didn't look right. Even though they were in every game, it just didn't look right, didn't feel right. And Jeff Brom knew he made a mistake in the offseason, but had to live with it. But anyway, they're just a little bit more aggressive. They have a experienced coaching staff now on the defensive side. So the thing I wanted to see was just how the defense played. And I thought they gave up 21 points. All of them came into red zone. So there's some work there, but they played differently. It was a different kind of defense. They allowed their stars to be stars. George Karlaftis at defensive end, Jalen Graham at outside linebacker, Cam Allen at safety. So they have some stars on the defensive side that if they play well, I think the defense will play well. So that was the number one thing to look for. And then offensively, they're working on running the ball better. They've been last in the Big Ten in rushing yardage the last 2 years. They need to improve that. They're never going to be first in the Big Ten in rushing, but they can't be last. So they're trying to improve that. And then their stars on offense, David Bell had a great game. Tight end Payne Durham had a great game, especially in the 4th quarter. Jack Plummer was poised, an experienced quarterback. So it was a game that I thought Purdue could win, should win. They did. They needed to make some plays down the stretch to do it. So all in all, it was a good victory. They needed to get it just to get off to a good start, and heading into this week against UConn.
Offensively, I know you mentioned the quarterback there in Jack Plummer. What type of offense are we looking at out of Purdue coming into this game against UConn? I know you talked about some emphasis on trying to run the ball a bit more and be more productive on that side of things. But from an offensive perspective, what should UConn fans be looking for out of this offense?
Well, the Jeff Brom wants to throw the ball. He's a former quarterback. He wants to throw it. He'd throw it every down if he could, but he understands balance is very important. So they're pass heavy, and they've recruited some really good wide receivers over the years. Rondell Moore is now with the Cardinals in the NFL. He was here 3 years. David Bell, he's a junior. He's probably off to the NFL after this year. So they've had some playmakers at the receiver position, and they need to get them involved and need to have those guys make some plays. So it's more pass first, pro style NFL. A lot of things out of the shotgun. They'll go no huddle, but not fast no huddle. So it's just a lean on the pass. Now they've tried to run the ball a little bit better, but they have some issues on the offensive line, and short yardage has been a big problem for them. So that's an area they really need to improve going into the season, is just learning how to pick up 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s, just to keep the ball, to cement a game or to get back in a game or whatever. But I think the receiving core is the deepest on the team and the most talented on the team, and they'll spread the ball around. Even though David Bell and Payne Durham, the tight end, you got a majority of the targets and the catches last week. But I'm not going to sit here and say it's a wide open offense, because I don't know if it is, but it's controlled by the passing game for the most part.
On the flip side of things, offensively for UConn, they've struggled to score the ball against Fresno State, had some difficulties against Holy Cross, and now they've got a new quarterback. On the defensive side of things, from the Purdue standpoint, who are some names that people should be looking at that might be causing some havoc and some chaos come Saturday afternoon?
Well, you're going to need probably 5 more offensive linemen to block George Karlaftis, the defensive end. He didn't, if you look at his stats from last game, I think he had 4 tackles, but he was in the face of the quarterback just about every time. I know some of the analytics people out there had him with like 8 quarterback hurries.
Oh, wow.
A lot of pressures. He didn't get the coveted sacks that he wants. He was just kind of a hair too late. And if you watch him play, if you watch any of the highlights from last week, he's very fundamentally sound. When he hits the quarterback, he doesn't land on him. And that can get you a penalty, as you know. So he's been taught very well. He's taken that teaching. He knows how to hit quarterbacks without getting a penalty. But he's the star of the defense. He'll come off the edge. UConn will have to double team him and maybe add a running back to chip him to keep him out of the backfield. He's that strong. He's that quick. He will be a handful for that offensive line. And then Jalen Graham, as we mentioned before, an outside linebacker. He's just a guy that plays sideline to sideline, long, lanky player, forced a fumble last week. He'll come off the edge and blitz and put some pressure in the backfield. Cam Allen had an interception last week. He's one of their better defensive players, and he's a safety, and he's a hard hitter. And they've got 2 hard hitters in the safety room with Marvin Grant and Cam Allen. And one guy that didn't show up a lot last week was DeMarcus Mitchell. He plays the other defensive end spot. He missed a lot of camp time due to an injury, but I expect him over the course of the next 2 or 3 games to really get after it. But I think you'll see a defense that likes to, I'm not going to say they blitz a lot, but they're trying to be aggressive, and they're really being aggressive in the back half, where they're playing press man and they're playing more of the ball than the receiver. And that's opened up some opportunities for them to make some plays.
Interesting. I know some people are probably going to think I'm crazy for even broaching this question with you, but if UConn were to pull this upset, what's the weakness on Purdue's side, either side, offensively or defensively, that UConn would have to exploit to somehow have a chance to win this game?
Well, Purdue's going to have to turn it over a lot. They're going to have a bunch of penalties, and they only had 4 penalties in the first game, so they handled that area really well. But Purdue would have to turn it over a lot, and they didn't. They had 1 turnover, and that came off a trick play last week. And it's not a crazy question, because Purdue has gone to Nevada and lost 2 years ago. They've gone to Marshall and lost back in 2015. So this is a weird game for Purdue fans, because number one, they've never seen their team be a 33 or 34 point favorite on the road against anybody. Yeah. So they're already tied up in knots about it. And now all they hear is that UConn is in turmoil. They're the worst program in the country. And Purdue is in a no-win situation here, because if they only win by 30, well, they didn't win by enough. Or if this comes down to a one-score game in the fourth quarter, how can that happen? So, I mean, Purdue probably from top to bottom has more talent on its roster than UConn has. But as you know, the equalizer are turnovers and penalties and mistakes, and not taking advantage of opportunities when you have them. That's scoring touchdowns in the red zone. It's not kicking field goals. So Purdue has to do all the things that it needed to do against Oregon State. They need to do them against UConn. I mean, they cannot have a lapse in this game. And as you know, you give the underdog a chance to stay in it, they're going to stay in it. And there's a lot of emotion right now with UConn's program, with the coaching change and everything else that's going on.
Absolutely. And is there any sort of trap game factor you feel for Purdue having that game against Notre Dame next up on the schedule, and coming out to East Hartford here to play UConn in between there?
Well, I wouldn't call it a trap game, because this is the first time that Purdue and Notre Dame will play since 2014. It used to be a game on the schedule every year for like 60 years. Then, because of Notre Dame's scheduling philosophy, it's come off the last 6 or 7 years. So nobody on this current team has played Notre Dame. Maybe 10 years ago, I would say, oh, it's a huge trap game for Purdue. I just don't think that rivalry is not embedded in this team right now. It's a trap game in the sense that Purdue should win. And if they just have to go win. And that's why it's a trap game, in my opinion, because they've just got to figure out a way to win, get out of there, get everybody healthy, and then worry about Notre Dame and the rest of their schedule.
I'll get you out of here on this one. And being here in Connecticut, I know everyone is interested in college basketball. I know Purdue's looking pretty good this year. How are things looking for the Boilermakers in this offseason? I know they'll be back here in Connecticut too, playing in the Mohegan Sun Hall of Fame tip-off in November. So fans might get a chance to go check them out while they're in town.
Well, they haven't even had an official practice, and I think they're in the Final Four. It's what people are looking at. They have a very talented team, extremely talented team. They've added a couple pieces through their freshman class that will play a lot this year. So yeah, everyone is looking forward to this basketball season, and hopefully fans will be back in the stands to see it. But it is a Final Four contending team. I don't think no one's running from that. No one's hiding from that. They just have to go out and do it. And they're going to be challenged along the way. You mentioned the tournament. There's going to be one team in that tournament that goes 0-2.
Yeah.
And that team could still make the Final Four.
Right.
That's how tough that tournament is. So Purdue's going to be challenged by North Carolina, and then either Villanova or Tennessee. They've got North Carolina State on the schedule. They're playing Butler, which is a in-state rivalry here. And, Connecticut fans know all about Butler. Yeah. And then the Big Ten schedule. They're going to get Michigan twice. They're going to get Ohio State, Indiana twice. So they're going to be tested in the Big Ten. But I think they have the pieces with Jaden Ivey coming off a really good freshman year. Zach Edey, another freshman who's from Canada, had a really good summer in the U19 tournament over in Latvia. And they've got Trevion Williams, who, tested the NBA. So they've got all the components to put together a run this year. It's just, can they do it? And I think they embrace it. I think they're ready for it, and ready to, in a way, ready to get basketball going, because there's been so much talk about it. Since the end of last season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, really appreciate you coming on today, giving us that preview of football and a little basketball talk there. So fans in the area here can go see both teams in the next couple months here. Football on Saturday and basketball in November. So Mike, thanks so much for coming on today. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.